coming up this week on the Markcast, we are finally here. The XFL Draft is coming. Last week, we needed Kevin Costner to build us a football field for the Las Vegas Vipers franchise. This week, can we get a draft pick, Kevin? Can we get a draft pick?
Hey, guys, he's here.
Sonny, thank God. Where you been? We're on the clock.
Sonny, when are we sending in the ticket?
Yeah. I already sent the ticket.
You did what?
You sent the ticket.
It's tradition. We all sent. New tradition, guys. All right, when this team starts winning, we'll go back to that.
Very exciting show this week, kicking off what should be the longest stretch of episodes we've ever had. XFL Draft Week is here next week. We have you covered with everything you need to know regarding the potentially 4-day event next week. Greg Parks of XFL Board stops by. We are breaking down all the details.
It is a very wide range of players that are going to be involved in this draft. I mean, you've got players who literally were cut by NFL teams probably over the summer and the final cuts. And then you have players who've never played a down of professional football and come from like D3 schools. I mean, so it's just going to be such a strange brew of players that are involved in this draft. You'll probably have players with actual NFL regular season game experience. I mean, it's just going to be such a wide range of players. It's going to be interesting to see, you know, how many of those players with little experience are chosen and how many players are chosen with, you know, from XFL 2020. How many players are chosen who were in training camps this past year? It's just going to be really fascinating to see how that all shakes out.
And then don't think I forgot about you CFL fans. We have Wade Zanchetta coming on CF Perspective, doing the big East and West Finals for CFL playoffs. BC Lions, we're going to Winnipeg, a big game. Getting ready for the Grey Cup. Should be exciting. Thanks as always. Like and subscribe. Hey guys, welcome to the Markcast. Reed here. We're going to hop right in tonight. I have Greg Parks here of XFL Board stopping by. Lots of draft news here, breaking down the Inside the League call tonight, obviously the press release and everything today. Just notes from me, Greg's here. Live stream next week during the XFL quarterback selection. I believe that's 11 a.m. Pacific on Tuesday, and then we'll be there all day, coast to coast at 8:30 a.m. Pacific. They love us West Coasters on Wednesday, doing day one of the draft. So make sure to like and subscribe. I think Greg's going to try to pop in when he can on Wednesday. I have lots of guests lined up, lots of guests that we know, some we don't. Greg, how are you fresh off your engagement? I want to say, Greg Parks here. What is more exciting, your engagement over the weekend or the XFL releasing the draft news today?
In case my girlfriend ever stumbles upon, my fiance ever stumbles upon this, I must say it was the engagement, and even legitimately, look, that's a life-changing experience. This is the first time XFL draft that we've ever had, but you only get engaged once, hopefully. So the engagement for sure.
That's good. So Greg and I are going to break everything down, the big preview show, and then I'll link everything on the post when I put it out, so you can check out the show Tuesday. Check out the show Wednesday, and then I will be up in Regina. It is currently, I think, 10 degrees up in Regina. We will be up there trying to stay warm at Casino Regina. So if you want your CFL news, we will have our regularly scheduled show. It'll be Friday or Saturday, November 19th before the Grey Cup. Like and subscribe. We're trying to get up there. We have the Brian Scott Ball, all that other stuff. So, Greg, we have the big XFL news dump today. The Inside the League call we'll break down here with notes as well. Biggest takeaways from you, just general thoughts of the XFL draft coming up, and then we'll get into specifics.
Finally, is kind of the feeling I got, and I knew, you know, with the Inside the League call with Doug Whaley with agents today, you had to know that it was either coming right before or right after that. So not a surprise that we got it this afternoon. Good to see that all of the information that was in the ESPN.com article that was put out with the names and logo releases seem to be confirmed here. And the fact that they're doing it in Vegas or on the outskirts of Vegas, along with the news that they are having a Vegas town hall next week as well on the 15th. So you hope that that means a stadium announcement is coming next week as well. I think it would be very strange if you had the town hall and had no stadium. I would hate to be put in that position if I was Rod Woodson, because that's going to be the question on everybody's mind at that town hall. So ideally they announced it beforehand. But yeah, as for the actual draft, you know, I tweeted some thoughts at Greg M. Parks about it. And I tweeted some differences that I noticed between how the draft will be handled this year versus how it was handled in 2019. I think ultimately, you know, there's some disappointment that ESPN is not going to play a bigger role in broadcasting the draft. But that's me, the hardcore XFL draft fan. I mean, the draft is something that even hardcore XFL fans may not be all that interested in. So you're serving a niche of a niche audience when you're doing something like this. So even airing it on ESPN Plus, you know, the juice might not be worth the squeeze for the league and for ESPN, because that would take, you know, you'd have to pay people to be on and dissecting the picks. And a lot of the people who would know are college football analysts, and they're all on the road doing college football for ESPN. You'd have to pay for the satellite time to air it and things like that. So probably wouldn't be worth it ultimately when it comes down to it. But again, for me, who is, you know, a draft nerd, an XFL nerd, I the more coverage, the better, I guess. But it does look like the XFL is putting some effort into it. They're talking about having a draft board on XFL.com, so the picks will be updated as they're made. And some other features that we might be getting as well. They did say ESPN will be covering it throughout the day, so that's good coverage too. And so, you know, that was the thing that stuck out to me, because that was the big question. I think a lot of the information we got today was just confirmation of what Doug Whaley had talked about in the summer ITL call that I was on. And then, you know, the big question looming over it is what kind of coverage was going to be made available in real time for the draft. And we got that question sort of answered today.
Yeah, I agree. With the limited interaction I've had with XFL, kind of whatever people today, I said, wow, I was surprised, because I thought the whole thing was, we got to figure out with The Rock, schedule, and Danny, and we got to get with ESPN, and we got to figure all this out. You know, to just to stream the quarterback one on Tuesday, and then, like you said, have the draft board on Wednesday. You're right. So as far as I'm concerned, the only stream is going to be the quarterback one, hosted by the ESPN college. I can't remember the sideline reporter I have here, Stormy Buatoni. I am terrible with that. I know she's very well known. But the interaction I got with the XFL was like, we have enough going on. Like, we're drafting 450 people in this many hours, and like we just don't have time to deal with like ESPN, which I totally understand. Like, let's just get through it. Let's post on the XFL board. Yeah, I think a lot of people will be disappointed that the actual draft portion isn't streamed. But I then come watch me, and then
good for you, you know.
we will do it. But yeah, so I get it. I get the concern. I get the sadness, but I also think that they're like, let's just get it go. But it is weird, because I thought that we postponed a lot of this of like, well, we got to figure out with ESPN where we're going to fit in. And then now if they're just going to do a couple hits, I don't know, you know.
Yeah, and it could be, I mean, they could have been being honest in terms of like having an ESPN personality hosting the stream for the quarterback selection. That may have been what they were talking. I mean, we just assumed that it meant that ESPN was going to somehow stream it, whether it was on, you know, whatever ESPN network was chosen. But it could have been simply like, we need to get someone from ESPN to host the quarterback selections. We need to get with ESPN to see what the best time to have the draft is, so that we could have them talk about it on SportsCenter or however that's going to be presented on ESPN. It could have been something as simple as that. We may just have read into it a little too much.
Yeah, so they're making this, they're calling it Draft Week here, which I think is exciting. We're making an event. So the 15th, 16th, and 17th. 15th at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern, they're going to live stream the selection show. I think that is what a lot of people, I think that's a really easy thing to share, right? Kind of get people involved, post it on the XFL's YouTube. I think that's really good. The coaches are going to pick the drafts. We'll talk through that. They've said they're going to have quarterbacks available either if you're on site. I'm going to be here. I've decided my time's better spent, live streaming here. And then it's going to be the 2-day draft like you probably would have expected. I am surprised it's going all day. The USFL kind of tried to make day one into more of a primetime event. Day one starting at 8:30 a.m. Day two with this more of the specialists is starting at 7:30 a.m. Are you surprised splitting it 2 days, starting so early and so extended?
A little bit. I think they could have done the quarterback one in more of a prime time slot, because that's where I think a lot of the interest is going to lie. That's where a lot of the, based on the quarterbacks that are working with Jordan Palmer, based on the quarterbacks that were released by the league in terms of who they were scouting working with Jordan Palmer, I think there's going to be probably more recognizable names there than there is in the general draft. So you could have gotten away with something primetime related there, especially if you're live streaming it. As far as the regular draft, it's going to be long. If you think back to 2019, that was a long process over the 2 days. So, if you started it later in the day, you'd be going deep into the night. So I think just from a logistics standpoint, it would be very difficult for them to do something like that at night. And if you're not streaming it, then there's really no incentive to do it later on. So not surprised the first 2 days of the draft are being are taking place during the day, but a little surprised that the quarterback selection show isn't in more of a more readily available time for people to actually watch, since they are streaming it.
Yeah, I maybe it's a length thing, right? Maybe it's not going to be very long, right? Like the announcement video, but that's a really easy, let's put that on ESPN too. Hey, we got the quarterback thing. That is, just talking through it now, okay, yeah, let's not deal with drafting the offensive lineman here. Okay, most people, but hey, we have the quarterbacks, get The Rock involved with that. We have Laura, that's going to be a part of it. Is surprising that way. I know you tweeted talking about they're going to have day one's going to have the 4 positional groupings, 11 rounds of selections for each group. The offensive skill position, defensive back, defensive front 7, and offensive line. Any thoughts with that? I think you said there were more rounds this. I know I was reading your Twitter today.
Yeah, one more round than in 2019. Each round was each positional group was 10 rounds. So you had 10 rounds of the skill position, 10 rounds of offensive line, etc. This way it's 11 rounds. I'm not sure why they added an extra round to each. I would assume that I feel like they're drafting fewer players this time around as well in total. I think 66 is the number they're taking to camp. Going to pare that down to 50 for the regular season roster. So the open rounds at the end of the draft, I think, are going to be smaller than we saw in 2019. There was no listed number of rounds for the open rounds at the end. I think that's just going to be kind of up to the teams, really, because and this is something Doug Whaley talked about over the summer on the ITL call, is they're not going to draft 66 players per team, and even though that's the maximum you can have for training camp, because there's going to be, and it was announced today in the press release, a supplemental draft in early 2023 for players whose contract expires. This wasn't specifically said, but the players whose USFL contracts expires on December 31st, for potentially NFL players whose practice squad contracts expire. So there's going to be a different crop of players available. And what the XFL didn't want to do, because training camp doesn't take place till January and the mini camp is going to be pretty well pared down, is they didn't want to draft guys in November and release them before they got an opportunity in camp, which is what you'd be doing if you drafted 66 guys next week and then had the supplemental draft in January. In order to fit 66, you'd have to cut some from this draft. So, I would guess somewhere between 50 and 60 players per team from this draft. That would allow teams to add anywhere from 6 to 10 to 16 players in that supplemental draft in early 2023.
Yeah, on the call tonight, they said about 450, like you said, they're going to be drafted during the week here, expecting 75 more about for the supplemental. Like we've said, and Mike has said, you pointed out, with the USFL contract expiry, those could be maybe some more of the exciting names coming in January than necessarily where we're getting some more of the Alumni Academy guys and everything else now. I'd be curious to see who is free from the USFL contracts or CFL as well, come January.
Yeah, and it's hard to say. Like, I know that you mentioned that expected about 75 players to be drafted in January. Maybe the league has intel of how many USFL players want to come over, but I mean, it could be a bigger influx than they expect. It's really so hard to say. There's still a lot of time between now and then for USFL players to make that decision, for players who are taking workouts in the NFL and they decide if they're not signed by a certain point, that they're going to want to be a part of the XFL. So I think the league's doing their best guesstimate, but those numbers could change dramatically from even their own estimations come early 2023.
There was a lot made, and we were even talking in our chat today where XFL, drafting earlier than the USFL, obviously playing, but it does seem like you're getting your first crop, because even if you're someone holding out for the USFL, maybe take your shot with the XFL if they cut you. It's not like the USFL isn't going to say, hey, we want you, or we don't want you now because you were like in an XFL training camp or whatever. I mean, it does feel like XFL kind of gets a first crop at a lot of the guys from the NFL and from, the Alumni Academy, obviously, and then USFL guys that were not signed already to year two.
Yeah, we're seeing USFL players signed. The teams are announcing them on Twitter. So there are some players who even were in NFL training camps this summer who are opting to sign with the USFL rather than go into the XFL. The one thing we don't know, you mentioned, taking your chance, getting drafted by the XFL, maybe not making the team in training camp and then going to the USFL. We don't know what XFL contracts are really going to look like. And I don't know how much that was discussed on the ITL call. I'm sure you'll fill us in here a little later on. But we know that the USFL's contract sort of prevents that from happening, at least the way that they appear to be written now. We don't really know how that's going to work for the XFL and what that's going to look like. So that may not be possible, but I don't know for sure.
Yeah, so the league said tonight, expect a lot more communications dump on Monday coming out. Obviously, the quarterback selection Tuesday. They're going to announce also who gets like the first pick and all that Monday. That's going to be announced, I think, at like 9 a.m. Pacific. So I would expect kind of another blast of news. Is it a snake draft? What the order and kind of all that stuff. For my purpose, I think some people get really into that. For my purposes, it's like, okay, whatever. Michigan holds the first round pick for next year's USFL, but like I don't really know who holds any draft picks after that.
Yeah, I think that's another positive from the news release today that the XFL made, is that they're making a real week of it. And we've always talked about how can the XFL stay in the minds of fans? How do they release their news? And that's been somewhat of a controversial topic amongst fans. How do they best release their news in a way that keeps them in the news cycle as long as possible? And so I like that they're doing sort of 4 days next week. You have the announcement on Monday, as you mentioned, of the draft order. You have the quarterbacks on Tuesday. Wednesday and Thursday are the draft. So I think having something every day next week as part of the draft week is a good move by them.
Yeah, I like that. Like, happy XFL draft week. I think that's good. They had on here talking about from the draft class, players coming in. About 725 players are going to be from the 2022 draft class, 115 from 21, and 275 from 2020. Anything stand out to you from that? I mean, even going back, but trying to keep it kind of within recent, I've been on even other podcasts with people like, hey, what's the XFL now? They're still talking like bringing in Manziel and stuff. It's like, okay, we need to kind of equate our minds around kind of the numbers that we should expect in the ages of the people coming into the league.
Yeah, so over the last 3 draft classes, if you add these up, it's about 840, a little over 1,000. So of these 1,700 players, give or take, that are in the draft pool, over 1,000 are going to be from the last 3 NFL draft classes. And not a surprise. They're probably the most ready in terms of being fit and working out and things like that. You have to imagine that a pretty significant portion of the remaining 700 or so are players from XFL 2020. who, if you recall, they had an automatic opt-in to the draft this year. So maybe several of them took advantage of that. A good portion of them took advantage of that. But I think you're seeing this sort of youth movement by the XFL that is exemplified with its coaches as well. They went young, they went inexperienced in terms of pro and college coaching. And that was a decision that the XFL made to do that. You can agree or disagree with whether or not that was the right move, but obviously a conscious decision to give these guys an opportunity that felt maybe that they should have gotten other opportunities elsewhere and just for whatever reason did not get those chances. And so, you're seeing that with the draft class as well, going younger. Strange to me maybe that 2020 has a lot more players than the 2021 draft class. I don't know what that means. We know that the pandemic kind of pushed some guys around because everybody was afforded an extra year of eligibility in college. So I'm not sure if that is a reason for those numbers to look the way they do. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see and to track once the draft hits where these guys are coming from and what kind of experience they have, because I think the USFL, their philosophy is a little different than the XFL's. They're taking players who I wouldn't say are older, but maybe a little more experienced in the NFL. And same with the coaches. We saw John DeFilippo hired today, which I thought was a great hire by the USFL, former NFL offensive coordinator. But again, it's just a different philosophy than what you're seeing from the XFL, not only with the hiring of head coaches, but also the recruitment of players.
You saved me having to add that in the outro this week. I appreciate that. We had no, I do appreciate it because I'm in my head like I got to remember to talk about USFL in the outro here at the end. But yeah, USFL they filled. Who was it? Larry Fedora left, and now we have a new, Go Blue or Go Waves or whatever the New Orleans Breakers is with all that stuff. This is draft players have until December 26th to commit. So if they get drafted, I guess it's 3 weeks longer than it was in XFL 2.0. So you're getting into that. Like I said, you could be drafted, and then you're deciding, but that's still. With these USFL contracts and you're in that and that's the 12th, that's December 31st cutoff. Like you're getting into the weeds with a lot of this, but thoughts that you might get drafted this week and then have till the end of December to decide?
There's always going to be players. We've seen that with the first XFL. We saw that with the second XFL, that players get drafted and for whatever reason they decide not to report to training camp. The thing that's interesting is they have that date, and I don't know if that date is any more significant because usually they'll have them sign their actual contract once they get to training camp. So, is that a signal that training camp is going to start around that time? Is this a separate issue? Some players may commit by December 26th, and then what happens in between then and the date that they have to sign their contract in training camp? How do you prevent players from changing their mind at that point or whatever the case may be? So, I don't know if that's a signal that training camp is going to take place around that time. I don't know if that's a preventative measure for the USFL to get a hold of these drafted players. I don't know what the significance of that is other than just noting that it's interesting.
Yeah, it sounds like the December, because the training camps will be January. It sounds like that whatever December, like that might not be as fully official as maybe it was. Because we did, like in 2020, right? Like we did the whole thing in Houston, right? And they were all in the different, like all the high school stadiums, and then they stopped down for the holidays. And then, so we'll see. It sounds like, if they want to do some workouts and stuff, they can do that, or if they want to get involved with people. But I think it'll be, come that January, I think it'll be the exciting time, and I guess in Choctaw.
And it could be a mini camp. We know from the summer call again with Whaley that the mini camp is going to look a little different, mostly just skill position players. But that if the skill position players have to commit by that time, maybe they want the whole roster, the whole drafted class to decide whether to commit by that time as well.
In terms of the draft, saying that, Danny and The Rock, not going to be live or whatever, but ESPN's going to be cutting in and out to them, maybe making some big draft class announcements or a draft pick announcements. Is that enough for you? Is that a good use of the talent that we have on hand?
I mean, you talked about the draft getting into the weeds, and certainly I talked about sort of it being a niche of a niche here. So I don't know. Dwayne Johnson and Danny Garcia, they showed up at the showcases, but they're not scouting experts. They're not going and scouting these players and suggesting players for the draft pool. So I don't know what else you have them do. You could have them, play the commissioner role and maybe have them announce. I know that they said that head coaches are going to announce the quarterbacks, but maybe have Danny Garcia and Dwayne Johnson announce the quarterbacks. They're going to be the cornerstones of these teams, or something like that. So they could do something like that. But beyond that, with the draft and things like that, it's just not. I don't think that's in their wheelhouse. Of going out and they do media and they do marketing, and that's their expertise. That's what they're really good at. They're not folks who are going to sit down and break down film with you. So I'm not sure what else they could really do.
I will just say this. I said this on Twitter, but I haven't said it on the podcast. XFL shop goes up. It's been months. It's been down months. We've had months. It's been a year. We have the shirts, whatever. We have a trucker hat with the team logos. Did you think with the genius marketing behind Redbird, Danny Garcia, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, we would have a trucker hat in the year of our Lord 2022, or did you expect more hats?
I am the last person who should be speaking on fashion. Let me just say that. So I have trouble matching outfits in the mornings when I get dressed. So I don't know if trucker hats are a thing that's in now. I mean, amongst the younger folks. So maybe they do have their pulse on what the people want more than we do, Reed. I won't discount that. I will say that that's not my fashion, but who knows? That doesn't necessarily mean it's not popular, I guess, is what I'll say. So I'll refrain from making any fashion judgments or statements about that.
Well, but you're said now because you're engaged. Like, my father was colorblind, and my mother literally had to lay his outfits out in the morning because he couldn't, he wouldn't know. He'd have a green tie with a purple shirt.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of feel like that sometimes when I come out of the bedroom and my fiance is looking at me like, and I know exactly what the look is, and I know to turn around and head back in and look for something else. You kind of get used to that look after a while.
I'm wearing the utility coat right now as we record, just throwing that out there. So that's Riley with all this. Talking about, I had my note here going to, we'll talk about win bonuses because I lost my note of where I wanted to go. 11,500 to win the title, 8,000 to win the semifinal game. What do you think about the XFL win bonuses?
Is that per player?
Yeah, it came out on the call tonight. Yeah.
Okay. I think that's reasonable. Anything above and beyond to win, I think is smart. Every incarnation of the XFL has had that, and I think it's smart because part of it is, and we've had this discussion on the XFL board forums as well, is how do you walk that line between wanting to be a league that develops players for the NFL, but also being an actual competitive league that's about winning, because that's really what the fans are going to want. It's nice that they can recognize some of their players who are going on to the NFL and say, hey, I knew them when. But ultimately, when you plunk down your hard-earned money to go to a stadium to watch these teams play, you want them to win. And, you don't want players who, it's sort of like the college system where now so many players are opting out of the bowl games because they're trying to just train for the NFL draft or stay healthy or whatever the case may be. How do you prevent XFL players from their sole focus being trying to get themselves into the NFL and because they are so close, and instituting the win bonus, I think, is a good way to ensure that, hey, it's the old Vince McMahon line: you get paid to play, but you get paid more to win. And I think that's smart. I think that's a good incentive to get these players to keep in mind that it's a game they're trying to win. And I know, these guys are competitors and they played football all their lives, and it probably goes without saying that when they're in between the lines, they're playing to win. But, just in case there is that temptation to kind of save themselves for the NFL, adding that little win bonus, I think, is helpful.
I don't want to give Vince any credit because I know that sometimes, with certain new XFL or whatever, you don't want to give credit. But It felt like Vince with the XFL 2020 salaries was kind of like Apple removing the headphone jack. Like, remember, there was no, like, the AAF went away, and Vince is like, I'm going to pay this. And I remember everybody being like, this is so low, like, this isn't enough. And Vince is like, well, there's no competition. What do you want me to do?
Yeah.
And now that's kind of what we're still paying. I mean, XFL is a little bit, right, and USFL, but it kind of seems like Vince set that standard, right, that we're kind of about now.
And it really all depends on how much Redbird is willing to put in. And that's kind of the mystery. We knew Vince was very upfront about how much he was willing to spend on the XFL, until he wasn't. But Redbird, we don't know. And so, you can look at the bonus money and you can try to figure out, okay, what does this mean? Is it a low number so that the Redbird's not wanting to put as much money into this league? Is it a high number that shows they're willing to spend? Without that context, it's hard to really judge what that win bonus number means.
I found out here. So there's lots of questions about, all right, are we doing preseason games? What's going on? There's going to be a half game played by every team for ESPN to have a dry run, and then they're going to have joint practices. So that doesn't surprise me. I mean, USFL didn't do any really preseason games. I'm sure I'll be corrected on that if they did. But, joint practices, we're doing the dry run, figuring out the broadcast. Does that gel with you?
Yeah, it sounds very similar to the other versions of the XFL. I think XFL 2020 may have done a little more scrimmaging, certainly than XFL 2001 did. And that kind of sounds like, they'll play a half game for ESPN purposes. But given the fact that they're all training in the same area, I don't think there's anything preventing teams from kind of getting together and scrimmaging and getting ready that way. So I don't think that's out of the question, even if there's no official preseason games.
The other interesting note was, and I'm excited for them to put out the rule book because Sam Schwartzstein, that now works at Amazon Prime, has told me that he'll come back on and we'll talk about it. But we had our town hall, the Seattle one last night, and Coach Hazlitt was asked, what's the deal with the rule book? And he said basically the same. Where he said I think his quote was like, the things that were changed, like most people won't even know this. He's like, if you're watching, you probably won't even know this. Are you happy? I mean, we can live with that, or what do you think about the rule book?
For sure. You don't know until you actually see the details. But one of the things that really put the XFL 2020 on the map and got people interested in it was the rule changes. I know there were some people who were a little skeptical of some of them, especially the kickoff. But I think it won the majority of people over. And it was different enough to set it apart from the NFL and to make it its own kind of personality. But it was ultimately the same game. There were times where XFL 2001 was too gimmicky. It didn't look like real football. But XFL 2020, their rule changes were enough to set it apart, but not enough to, make the game unrecognizable for football fans who were tuning in to watch football. And so that was another line that they had to walk, and I think they walked it really successfully. We never did see the overtime rules put into play in 2020. I think the USFL has overtime rules that are very similar, and we saw at least one of those games this year. I'm not sure how many we ended up seeing, but I think that might be, if I had to guess, one of the rules that may have been tweaked a little bit in 2023. So we'll just have to see once that rule book comes out. But certainly, the rules were successful almost across the board, maybe even across the board in 2020. So the fact that it's returning, I think, is a good thing.
Yeah, I hated that, and this is my XFL and Love and Sam, whatever. Like, I hated that USFL basically lifted the XFL overtime and then got to do it before the XFL did. Like that.
I know, yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's, that's just something you got to live with. I mean, there's not much. If you believe the pandemic really killed the XFL and not decisions made by Vince McMahon within the pandemic, then, I mean, that's just something you got to live with. And, the XFL is going to be in stadiums before the USFL. And I'm sure the USFL is kind of not happy about that or kicking themselves about that. They got the overtime first, but we got the stadiums. I'll take the stadiums if I'm being honest.
We have 7 right now, 7 stadiums.
I know.
I got a couple other notes here. I'll let you get off here soon. I appreciate you staying up late for us on your East Coast time. They said Oh, just in terms of like final draft notes, teams can opt out after a certain number of picks. Like we were talking a little bit before, but just to confirm that, like you don't necessarily have to pick 18, whatever wide receiver. I'm making that number up, but like you're able to pick and then save some of those spots later on. That gels with you.
Yeah, I would assume most of that's going to happen in the open rounds, just for training camp and competition purposes, and just having enough bodies to have a training camp. I think you're going to see most, if not all, teams exhaust all 11 picks for each one of the positional rounds. I think once you get to the open rounds, then you're going to see teams diverge in terms of philosophy on how many players to pick there.
Yeah, I'm curious how all this ends up, because there's been a tremendous number of players that are in the draft pool. I see so many, and you've seen like tweeting, and I'm in the draft pool, whatever. We have all these alumni guys where it says if you're in sessions 1 or 2, you're going to be in the current draft, and then sessions 3 and 4 of the Alumni Academy, they'll be eligible for the supplemental. We have the XFL 2020 guys, all the alumni people. Like, there's going to be so many broken hearts by the end of all this. Like, I'm really scared for a lot of people.
Yeah, that's the disappointing thing. It's always the disappointing thing, even when you're watching the NFL draft and they've got cameras in people's houses and they don't always get drafted. And you can see it on their face. You can see the disappointment. And, that's the reality of playing professional sports. And I think, if you're in a position to get drafted by the XFL, that probably means you've experienced that disappointment before. So, not that it's good to have to go through it again, but it's not the end of the line. If you're not drafted, there are going to be injuries in training camp. There are going to be teams looking to fill spots during training camp and fill spots during the regular season. So that's not the end of the line. We're seeing a resurgence in other leagues, like the arena leagues, the NAL and the IFL. The XFL is getting a lot of players from there. The CFL, the USFL. So really, like, this is a pretty good time if you are a football player looking to make a career out of playing the game. Even if you don't get drafted by the XFL, there are still other opportunities out there for you. And I would certainly encourage any of those players to look into those opportunities, because you never know when a league like the XFL or the USFL is going to come calling.
It's like, you cover wrestling for Wade. I mean, having AEW and having WWE and having TNA being, doing whatever they're doing, and having, you just, it breeds, it really is a peak time for a lot of these niche interests that people have right now, just having options for not only fans, but of course the players and the people participating on that side.
For sure. And you mentioned, I mean, just the strange brew almost of players who are going to be in this draft. You've got the XFL 2020 players. You've got, players who have maybe zero experience, but impressed in a showcase. So these, lower level college players or players with no real pro experience. You've got, free agents who were in NFL training camps. I mean, it is a very wide range of players that are going to be involved in this draft. I mean, you've got players who literally were cut by NFL teams probably over the summer and the final cuts. And then you have players who've never played a down of professional football and come from like D3 schools. I mean, so it's just going to be such a strange brew of players that are involved in this draft. You'll probably have players with actual NFL regular season game experience. I mean, it's just going to be such a wide range of players. It's going to be interesting to see how many of those players with little experience are chosen, and how many players are chosen with, from XFL 2020. How many players are chosen who were in training camps this past year? It's going to be really fascinating to see how that all shakes out.
It's exciting. I'll be curious. The other note they had here, and I had something funny I was going to say. I totally forgot. That every player that is in the pool has been recommended by at least one of the teams. So you have, you at least know, right, that you're getting people that way, that at least someone's kind of looking out for that. It makes sense, right? Any other thoughts on that?
No, I mean, yeah, that's a good compliment to have, that these players can at least know that by being in the draft pool, someone recognized their talent. And even if they don't get drafted, even if they don't get signed, maybe that's going to be enough to keep them scratching and clawing to a professional career. And so, sometimes even the smallest compliment like that is going to be what fuels these guys and the passion that they have. So I think that's really cool.
Yeah, I remember. I have no doubt, and I've said this, I have no doubt, I think the football that is going to be put on the field here in February is going to be the best alternative football we have seen. Just,
Wow.
is it been enough I mean,
XFL 2020 was pretty good. I mean, that was kind of the benchmark. So this is that's not an insignificant statement, I don't think.
Well, I was going to say, but I have many other concerns about things surrounding the football.
Sure.
I think the football is going to be outstanding. I think you have some of the best minds, and the coaches are motivated, and they seem bought in. And we've scouted, and we've gone to Hawaii, we've gone to HBC, Jackson State, and we've done all these things, and we have the indoor football league. I think the football will be exceptional. But it is a lot of care. You can look at these Zoom calls in the draft, and I think it's going to be fascinating, like you said, next week, seeing all these players. Because they have this is like all the time that they've done the last year. Like, it's finding all these players for this week.
Yeah. And the other thing I will say too is we've seen the team Twitter accounts and some of the coaches post pictures. I know Anthony Becht did so, sitting down with his coaches, watching film of these players, and they had their laptops and they had their, I think something that kind of gets lost is when you have coaches like Anthony Becht and Hines Ward who don't have a lot of experience, you tend to think, this is maybe gimmicky, or maybe they don't know how to run the process. They're maybe the league isn't taking it seriously by hiring these guys. But when you see the time and effort that these guys are putting into it, and the scouting that they're doing, and you see Anthony Becht at training camps and watching, he posts pictures of him watching preseason games on his laptop, and then meeting with his offensive staff and meeting with his defensive staff, and he's got the projector and he's going over film. I mean, these guys and the league itself is taking this very seriously. This isn't just throwing darts at a dartboard to try to draft guys.
Yeah, I would argue too seriously, but no, yes, I do. But
no, I will say there are things that it does feel like this league is taking itself sometimes a little too seriously, certainly than XFL 2020 did. I felt like there was a more fun feeling leading up to XFL 2020 than there is this. It does feel like, you're getting the corporate speak every time Danny Garcia does an interview. It does feel a lot more sanitized version of football than we got in 2020, where it was just, Vince McMahon running it and just a bunch of football guys doing it. Now you have Redbird, this, multi-billion-dollar investment company, and you have Danny Garcia and Dwayne Johnson, who are kind of rock stars in their own way, but also very, Dwayne Johnson is one of the most popular movie stars because he's very careful about how he approaches things. He doesn't, everything is, he does things very carefully. There's nothing he says or does that feels kind of off the cuff. And so we're seeing that in the build up to the XFL, and it's just not, it's different. I'm not saying it's wrong or they shouldn't do it this way. It's just different.
When the team names leaked on the website and we did our big live stream, and people said, well, maybe they were doing it for fun, or they were messing around, or they were putting placeholders up there. I'm like, nothing about this league seems like we're just going to kind of wing this.
Yeah, no, everything, if anything, it's the opposite. It almost feels too thought out and too methodical.
Yeah. Anything else before I let you go? I know you were excited to come on, do this. We obviously had the logo stuff, but then now all this came up, which is exciting, new stuff to talk about. Anything else you want to make sure you get off before I let you go?
No, just, plugging my work for XFL Board. I'll have a column up probably this weekend. I'll try to get it in before the draft starts next week about the town hall events. We've had 7 of the 8 now, and I've been able to ask questions of people, yourself included, who've attended these town halls, just kind of get a feel for it and what it was like to be there and what kind of atmosphere it was. So I'll be writing a column about that. Certainly, if you attended any of the 7 town halls, I'd love to hear from you. Drop me a DM at Greg M. Parks. on Twitter, and get it in before I write my column and submit it, because next week it's going to be all draft, and my fiance is going to be traveling next week, actually on Wednesday, through the weekend. So like I'm gonna be hunkered down. I'm gonna be doing so much writing about the draft next week. It's so be on the lookout for that at XFL Board. I'll be doing a lot of draft analysis next week.
Well, I think what you do as well is more of these, a little bit more deep dive, right? Really fleshed out, I think that's good. I think you and the content that you bring to XFL Board alongside the discussion stuff that's done over there, I think is tremendous, just in terms of having that other voice and having, we have Hub and Newsroom and having XFL Board. Like, I think all the sites provide, and I think it's fascinating. And I am really excited to see the town hall, especially when you do your solicitations with the mailbags and stuff and getting people. It's like you're able to filter everyone's voice into like, okay, here's something that you can actually like comprehend.
Yeah, I try to. Sometimes successful, sometimes not. But yeah, we have a lot of great voices covering this league, and I'm just glad to be a part of that.
Well, thank you, Greg, for coming on. Like I said, late night for him. We're getting off the Inside the League call. Appreciate that. Remember, we're announcing who gets the draft picks Monday. For whatever the order. Quarterback selection Tuesday. Day 1 Wednesday. Day 2 Thursday. I'll be traveling, so hopefully we don't draft Pat McAfee or something in the specialist round, and then because I'll be on the plane to Regina. Like, hopefully it's a little more kosher on that day 2 at this point.
Yeah, I would expect the specialist to be pretty low key.
Well, but I do have the most friends in that class, so I mean, I should be around BS in general. Anyway, Greg, XFL Board, Greg Parks, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Reed.
Well, I'm thrilled today. Another CF Perspective, contributor. We have Wade here, Wade Zanchetta. Thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate it. How are you doing?
No problem. It's great to be on. I'm doing well. I mean, we've had a really warm fall, and it's always nice when you have the playoffs and you don't have to bundle up too much to go and watch a game.
Well, they were scaring us. We went to the Lions game, and it's in the Dome, and they were posted, hey, it's going to be cold. I'm like, okay. I mean, I'm going to die if we're going this, and then we got to go to Regina. But that is the one overlying, winter is coming here in the CFL playoffs, so it is a little scary.
It is, and I mean, I know it's U Sports, but both of the Saskatchewan teams hosted a playoff game last week, and it was snow in Saskatoon, and then halfway through the Regina game, snow started there too. So they're already getting their fair share, and we're kind of holding off here in Ontario.
Well, this is good. So Wade's going to come on. CF Perspective, you guys kill it. Marshall and Connor and everybody killing it. CFL stuff all year. Appreciate you coming on here, and we're doing our CFL playoffs. Big games this weekend. I'm really excited that Montreal is still in the race, and then obviously BC is our team. Overall, first off, thoughts on the playoffs as we sit right now?
Nathan Rourke. I mean, he looked good to me in the Week 21 game against Winnipeg, even though it was just a small sample size. But I thought he came out and looked fantastic. He looked like he hadn't missed a beat, really. And I guess that's why they had used the previous week to get him prepared. But you look at just some of the throws he made. I mean, the 2 corner shots on the end zone, the first touchdown to Hollins and the second one to Burnham. That was great ball placement by him. So I was really excited to see Nathan Rourke. And then in the East, you mentioned Montreal. Trevor Harris, I like the Ticats. Trevor Harris has killed the Ticats in the playoffs, even when he was with Ottawa. So I had a feeling, I said to Connor before the week started, this is going to be a Trevor Harris high efficiency, just kind of shredding the team apart. And as we see, they're now in the East Final. I
am glad that, we've done the Winnipeg Hamilton thing. It's like if you ever used to watch WWE, they would do like a cage match. Yeah. And if you had like the champion got eliminated first, and then you're like, oh, no matter what, like we're getting a new title. It's good that we can either have Montreal or Toronto actually make it to the, because Toronto's been so close. And it was exciting. I mean, were you surprised that Montreal pulled it out? I mean, they've kind of been sluggish late.
No, I wasn't surprised. I was more surprised at Hamilton. I guess they kind of put up a fight later in the game, but 6 points through the first half. Dane had his struggles. They went to Schultz as well. But to me, it was getting away from the run game. And I know when you're down 14-3 after the first quarter, some people always say, oh, we have to air it out. But the strength of this Ticats offense later in the year was Wes Hills, STE, and that run attack. And they went away from it. Wes Hills finished with 5 carries on the game. So that was more shocking to me. I was very happy to see Jake Winicky find the end zone, though. That was always a big plus.
Yeah, I don't know what Hamilton does after this, because it was like they were horrible all year. They figure it out. They don't make it, like you said. Dane. I love Dane Evans as a person. I don't know if he's the future there. Where do you see Hamilton kind of regrouping here after the season?
I don't think they really can go anywhere else. I mean, they're paying Dane, I think, well over $400K in money next year. So to me, with Dane Evans, like, you kind of just have to hope that he regains his confidence, because that was the big thing to me this year. Was early on you saw a ton of interceptions, but they weren't just like bad throws. They were throws that would be tipped or deflected at the line and somehow fall into the opposing team's hands. And it just kind of took away his confidence throughout the year. To me, that's where I want to see Dane go, is where does he get his confidence back? Because with Bo Levi Mitchell entering free agency, people are going to be looking there. And Cody Fajardo doesn't look like he's back with Saskatchewan. So could that be an option? And with the Ticats, you're paying so much for Dane Evans, you almost have to, or are handcuffed to him as a member of your team. And if he gets his confidence back, maybe he can return to form.
It's just hard, and I get it. I feel like we talked about all season with CFL, quarterbacks, like, they got to get right here, figure it out. I mean, at some point, like, we kind of, you've had, CFL season so long. I mean, even compared to the NFL, like, at some point, we kind of know what you are or not. I worry. I don't know. I like Hamilton and a lot of the pieces they have there, but it does seem like they came on strong. I don't know if that's better or worse to end kind of with a bang.
I think it's good for building going into the offseason, but at the same time, you end on a loss, right? Unless you're the champion, you're going to end on a negative note. But they have, like you mentioned, a ton of pieces. Tim White really came on this year. Stephen Dunbar was fantastic as a downfield weapon. I look at Hamilton as just okay. We've been to back-to-back Grey Cups. We have our quarterback. We are going to pay him a ton of money, but we're third in the East. Okay, do we try it again or not? And I think they do try it again. I think it's kind of just a recollect, because this year was odd for them. There's a lot of just uncharacteristic things with the Ticats, and maybe they add an extra offensive line piece in the offseason. Maybe they add an extra receiving weapon. But I think that they're going to try and regroup and go back again.
Yeah, it's like you said. Yeah, we've done all this work. We're still third in the East, and I don't know if that. I don't know if that's not a great spot to be at.
No, it's really no man's land, right? Because with Ottawa, yes, they were so poor, but you can easily point to them and be like, all right, well, we lost Jeremiah Mazzoli. That would have drastically changed the outcome of our season, and you can kind of hope for that. And you have the young players like Cyril and Zach, the 2 offensive linemen. Where you can be like, yeah, we have young pieces. We have a lot of core aspects of our team. We just couldn't get the quarterback right. But we had Mazzoli sitting there with his broken leg. So to me, I think Ottawa is in a really happy place to kind of change the team we're talking about. Whereas Hamilton, you're kind of stuck in no man's land.
Yeah. You're outside of Ottawa there. Like, how different does the world look if that Mazzoli injury doesn't? Was that like week 5 or 6? I think
it was around week 6. Yeah, against Saskatchewan. I don't know. I think they for sure break the home losing streak and maybe get a couple more fans happy back at TD Place. But no, with the Red Blacks, I don't know really, because they ended up firing Lapo during the year, Paul LaPolice. And I really think that with Mazzoli healthy, the team, to me, it was the red zone percentages. And that was sort of getting better week in, week out. But then Mazzoli's injury happened and it just all went to hell. So that would have been the determining factor to me.
Speaking of so Hamilton, Montreal, I'm thrilled. So we're one step closer. I have a standing bet with Gary Stern. If the Alouettes make it to the Grey Cup, he's got to come on our live show. So that is, I have a very vested interest in that. I know that Mike Mitchell that's listening to this covers the Argos. We love the Argos and all the MLSC of it all. But do you think the Alouettes have a shot here? Or I never know if the Argonauts are a good team.
Okay, that's nobody ever really knows, right? The same with Montreal. You have such highs and lows during the year. But to me, with Trevor Harris and Eugene Lewis and Jake Winnipeg, they can really play with anyone. And I know Toronto has a great defense, and Tavares McFadden, former XFLer and NFL player, he makes a huge difference on the back end. So many turnovers this year. But with Trevor Harris, the efficiency he throws the ball and the receiving weapons they have, they can get into a gunfight with anyone. So I'm really interested. William Stanback's been like coming on slowly. They've been really splitting his reps with Walter Fletcher to get a 1-2 punch. But I think Montreal could do it. I think they really can. Their defense is very opportunistic. But it comes down to Trevor Harris and his efficiency in taking care of the football.
Seeing everything that happened, and firing and we bring in and all that is, we just talked here. Hamilton's third in the East. Is Montreal that good? Were they able to figure it out this year? Or is the East just that poor that they're able to be here second now?
See, I really hoped that it's kind of selfish, but I was hoping that BC would kind of cross over, and it would have taken away a great atmosphere at BC Place. But to me, I've said since week 1 this year, I want BC Winnipeg in the Grey Cup just so we get that selfish matchup. But no, I think the East is good. The East is always good. But when you have teams like Winnipeg sitting out west who just kind of steamroll everyone, you kind of go, oh, is the East really that good if they're going to lose that much to BC and Winnipeg? But I think they are a good football team, and they're well balanced, and they've really dove in headfirst under Machocha into building with French players and rebuilding that French identity with the team. And I think you saw that last week with the home crowd. But I think this Alouettes team can compete with teams. I don't think they can compete with a Winnipeg if they get to the Grey Cup. But I certainly think they're a good enough team to get there and earn a rightful spot.
I'm going to be, I have they're blowing leaves outside my window right now, so I'll be muting between questions, but I think we'll get through it. Because, the Alouettes really could have let everything fall apart. I mean, they really you had so much going on there, and even with the front office and Gary Stern and everything, I mean, it's really remarkable that they've made it here, and they're one step away from being in the Grey Cup.
Honestly, when they made the head coaching move this year and Machocha stepped in and it was the stretch of high penalty games, I was out. I was saying there's no way on earth this team is going to rebound. But they've proved me wrong, and they have cleaned it up. I'm trying to fish through here. I think they only had they only had 6 penalties last week against Hamilton. So, I mean, they certainly have turned around. I know the whistles get put away a bit more in the playoffs, but I think they have turned around. And as Machocha settles into head coaching, he hasn't had coach since 2019, right? When he was with the Carabao in U Sports, but you just kind of get back into the flow of things. It takes a little while, right? Knocking the rust off. So he's done that. And now here they are on the brink of making the Grey Cup.
Is he their guy moving forward? Because I thought when he got instilled, it was like, well, we don't know if this is really how. I mean, is he their guy?
If they win Sunday, there's no way you're pulling him out of the spot. I think that if he makes a Grey Cup as the interim hard brackets head coach, I think there's no way that he steps away from it. He can kind of point to ownership and say, look, I took over. We made a Grey Cup. Let's see what I can do with a full year. If they lose this game, I think there's probably conversation about it. But to have this late season resurgence, I think it would really be up to him in saying, I want to step back away and let's find a guy. But I think if he wins, he's so competitive that he would just kind of say, I'm not stepping away from this. Give me a full year and see what we can do.
We'll talk the West here, but who do you have? I mean, I think both these matchups are exciting. I would probably give the West the benefit here, but who do you have between Toronto and Montreal?
Toronto. Andrew Harris coming back off the bye. McLeod Bethel-Thompson been quite good this year. Curly Gittins Jr. as well has been fantastic. I think he's most outstanding Canadian finalist. But yeah, I'm going to say Toronto. Just the extra bye week, getting some players healthy, rested. I think they'll pull it through on it. I know it doesn't go with your bet, but I'm hoping you get your bet. But I just think Toronto off the bye makes too much sense.
Yeah, talking, the West, and there was so much talk, BC crossing over, Calgary, what's going on, might have been more competitive. Regardless, I think even bigger than the Grey Cup is this matchup this weekend between Winnipeg and BC. Am I wrong in that? You laugh. Am I wrong in that estimation?
I think you can't really say it's a mistake, right? Because you can't stop a team from winning in BC. But I just said I would have loved to have BC Grey Cup against Winnipeg, just because I think that's the most fun, right? The biggest storylines is Nathan Rourke, first year as a starter, injury, comes back, Grey Cup. That would be fantastic. And to have it on the biggest stage against Winnipeg, who's going for the three-peat, that would just be great. Luckily, we get it a week earlier. Unfortunately, it's not for a title. It's for a spot in the finals. So I think yes, it sucks, but we can't stop a team from being good and winning.
But that's the thing. I mean, it was like last year in the NFL, we had Kansas City and Buffalo there in the playoffs, and the Super Bowl was a
divisional game compared to the conference finals against Cincinnati. Most people, honestly, even when I think of it, I'm like, oh, that was a great AFC championship game. Then I'm like, wait a second, they had to play Cincinnati after.
But sometimes you get those better. I mean, I think this could be it. BC, I thought it was good. We were there. I was excited to get to go see kind of that atmosphere and felt a lot of people. I thought they did good without Lucky Whitehead. How do you think the BC's game plan was? They're kind of we're trying to get back to full strength here.
I thought it was great. You mentioned the atmosphere, so I do want to say absolute shout out to Amar Doman and what he's been able to do in a calendar year with this franchise and making them really BC's team once again. I mean, opening up the Upper Bowl for a playoff game, I think it was Sarah McLachlan did the national anthem. Yeah, that was all the just little pieces, like the yard parties outside all summer long and while we had the nice weather. But with BC, the attack is all about James Butler. And I know we like Nathan Rourke, but 20 carries on the day for him. And I know Pipkin's their next leading rusher. They don't try to run anyone else. It's just James Butler, go, go, go. And he really opens up a lot of the second level throws for Nathan Rourke. So as they kind of go into this Winnipeg game, Winnipeg's got a great interior line, defensive line through and through. But that is going to be the task for them, is trying to get James Butler going and allowing the second level throws to be opened up for Nathan Rourke.
I thought the funniest thing, and shout out to Matt Baker and Nick over at the BC Lions, Winnipeg, and it's cold here, and look at the weather and all that. And then they had James Butler, the video with drinking the iced coffee
at the beach. I saw that. I think the caption was "getting ready for the winter weather" or something like that. No, that's a great piece of PR. But I kind of had New York Giants boat trip vibes when I saw them all lining up to get on the jet skis. I was like, uh-oh. What are we doing here, guys?
Well, I know, but that's all I've heard is, hey, it's cold here. You play in the dome, which I would have liked Winnipeg to maybe step up a little bit more. Hey, we're two-time defending champions. We've just paid our quarterback $1 zillion. But yeah, okay, it's cold. We understand that is. I mean, clearly they have more advantages than that, right?
I know, but with Winnipeg, you got to think about this. This is the identity of the team, right? They don't practice indoors. Like some teams, like Calgary last week went inside. Winnipeg is out there. They are practicing in it. They are used to it. And the fans feed into that as well. I think I saw someone had mentioned they're closing in on a sellout already for the game. We still have a couple days left of ticket sales. But for them to really feed into that and the fans feed into it, it sucks. When you're playing out in the cold and in the snow, the last thing you want to have to do is kind of sit there on the sidelines for a 10-play drive as Collaros picks apart your defense and you're sitting there and you're James Butler just trying to keep warm and trying to stay loose, or Nathan Rourke, you have to go over and throw the ball a couple times. Especially Nathan Rourke trying to keep his foot elevated now. The new kind of I don't know what to say, the thrown together elevated. It's like a cooler with a pad on top. Even him trying to manage that, but still having to stay loose and warm in a cold environment. Certainly not ideal whenever you have long drives against you.
This is like they were having the story earlier this year that the Dolphins have their stadium built, so it's 30 degrees warmer on the one sideline. Winnipeg, I think, should get an asterisk here for all their games, right?
Well, you see that creative stadium planning is always a thing. And I know Queen's University, they do the same thing at Richardson. So most of their games, noon or afternoon, the Queen's bench has the backdrop of the press box. And that's where most of the fans sit. So you're kind of like, oh, do we need that? But then as soon as the game starts, the other team's sideline is just sitting in sunlight until the sun sets. So a couple of those early games in September and for last week of August, you really get that difference. And Jacksonville, I think, does the same thing in the NFL as well, with kind of dividing their stadium up like that.
Speaking Nathan, coming back, I saw Farhan, I can't remember if it was this morning or yesterday, talking like maybe NFL has cooled a little bit because, the injury and coming back and all that. So, God willing, maybe we get another run at this next year with kind of everyone. But if that doesn't happen, I mean, do we have enough pieces here? I mean, Winnipeg I have a very limited time covering the CFL, but the greatest force that's ever been known.
I think to go, I don't know, with Winnipeg, they've just been able to keep guys together, right? You don't see those big losses in free agency. And even this year, they lost Kenny Lawler. Oh, well, our rookie Dalton Schoen's going to lead the league in receptions or receiving yards and touchdowns. Like, there's just always a replacement. And they've kept key pieces together like Jackson, Jeffcoat, Claros. And they've been able to move on. Even this year, 113 rush yards per game. When Andrew Harris left, people were like, yeah, right. And even early on, like, you looked at their run game, you're like, oh, wow, you guys sure you should have let Andrew Harris go? But as the year goes on, it starts to click and they find their form. With or without Nathan Rourke, I think the Bombers team is very talented. And BC has the talent to match it. But where the difference comes down is the experience in the quarterback play. And for what experience is worth, I guess, with Claris being back-to-back Grey Cup champions, Nathan Rourke just played his first playoff game. We'll see kind of how much that experience plays in. It's one thing to play a playoff game in your dome, at home, in front of a nice fan base. When you go out on the road to the frigid Winnipeg environment where everyone's screaming at you on offense instead of the other team, it's a little bit different. So we'll see how the experience plays in.
It was interesting. I was going to mention before, we going to BC Place and being from the States, and you look and you're like, man, this is downtown. It's so cool, right? Like here in Seattle, the Kraken play like kind of right downtown. There's all this stuff. But like, you're walking around, like no one could care less about it. Like it's all these people coming from outside of like the downtown.
Yeah.
It was just a really weird environment, like wearing my my CFL stuff around and like, no, oh yeah, is that going on? Like, oh yeah, what's happening today? Like no idea that this is happening.
It is. And when you have such global cities, right? Like Toronto is victim of this as well. And New York, for that sense, for a great example. Yes, you have your diehard Jets and Giants fans, but in a city of X million people, not everyone cares about it. Like life goes on around you. So you could be coming into the stadium and into the city. Whereas when you go to Hamilton, you guys were at the Hamilton. Yeah. Like it's right in the suburbs. Everyone around you is a Ticats fan. And you kind of like, a Ticats game is going on that day. But in some of the bigger global cities, there's so much diversity in the population and diversity in interest that you do get that. Oh, wait, we do have a playoff game today. Oh, cool. Well, good luck. Enjoy your day. I'm gonna go bike down on the ocean side. Like there's just so much differentiation in what people are doing in the city.
Yeah, I do actually feel bad for Hamilton in that regard, just because they did feel like they live a lot more of that in that city and wanting them to kind of have that spot in the Grey Cup. But yeah, different the tailgates and stuff last year. I'll be curious kind of what it is this year. But who do you give the advantage to here between Winnipeg and BC?
Winnipeg. Until proven otherwise, I will take the back-to-back Grey Cup champions. But when you look at it, more yards per game goes to BC. They have better pass rush in terms of sacks. I'm not going to say better pass rush outright because Jackson and Jeffcoat are who they are. But when you have guys like Boom Gwacham, I think he's going to be back this week from the injury. I think he's fantastic and he's a great player in his own right. But I'm going to give it to the defending Grey Cup champions. Just I don't know. There's something about playing at IG Field in the winter with a lot on the line that these guys kind of get up for.
Are we looking at a dynasty here? Are we seeing a three-peat on November 20th?
I think you can already say dynasty with back-to-back championships, right? I mean, you want to say great team, super team when a team makes it to an right. You're from Seattle. When the Seahawks went to a second Super Bowl, it was, start the dynasty. And then they ended up losing and it just fell apart from there slowly but surely. But when you look at a team to win back-to-back, like even when Brady won back-to-back, it was okay. This is a dynasty. And then they happened to go and win some more afterwards. But have sustained success like this with Winnipeg, especially over the COVID year, it's just incredible to see them keep it together and not lose key pieces and have it fall apart because of that.
Well, and here and now they lock up Caleros now for another 2 years. And I mean, I know the CFL contracts and stuff, but I mean, they clearly, obviously, have all their faith in him. And it's cool to see. I just wish, that's one of the things CFL and 19s, but I just wish there was a little bit more parity sometimes with, them just basically like we're ants and they have the magnifying glass, and there's just like killing everyone else.
I know it feels like that sometimes, but I think last year their West final wasn't overly big for score differentiation. I do think with Winnipeg though, they do just feel like that giant, right, where they're just stepping on everyone as they come through. I think that's the biggest thing about the dynasty is they do that with rotating pieces. Like it's not the same. Yeah, it's the same quarterback, same left tackle, same pass rusher. But there's new pieces on defense, new receivers, new guys on offense, like Greg Ellingson, Dalton Schoen, and Brady Oliveira are now the team leaders, where in years past you had Lawler and Harris, right? Key is always Nick Dembski, though. You got to keep him around.
Anything else before I let you go? A lot of rebuilding here to be done, and we got Edmonton and Ottawa and stuff. Anything you're looking forward to here? Sans Grey Cup CFL storylines?
Interested in Edmonton's quarterback situation. We saw Trey Ford take the reins, and when he got hurt, Cornelius came in, and they extended Cornelius right before they brought Trey Ford back. So it's kind of up and down. Like, who are you going with? Are you going with the kid, or are you going with the guy that you just gave a bag to? And that to me is kind of determining where Chris Jones goes with this franchise, because as you get the young, talented quarterback, you want to give him a chance to grow, but do you have to have a guy making so much money if Trey Ford's going to sit behind you to sit behind Trey Ford? And if your plan was to have Trey Ford as a starter, why would you then pay him so much money? You can find a serviceable backup for a heck of a lot less in the CFL.
I loved when they had just extended Cornelius. And he played in the XFL. We know Cornelius, and we lived through the Elizondo of it all last year and all that. But then they just extended him. He comes in, and it was like those 2 interceptions, like right at the goal line. I'm like, you are playing yourself out of okay, yank him now. Like it certainly. I just couldn't think of a worse turnaround. Like, we pay this guy. No one seems to really like him. I mean, and anyone I talk to from Edmonton doesn't seem like they're all in on him. And then he comes out and just totally blows it.
I think that's why nobody's all in on him, right? Like, he has such great measurables. He's big. He's athletic. He can throw the ball. Like, he can put a strawberry through a battleship, is one of the old sayings. But then he comes out and he makes these throws where you're like, dude, what are you doing? Where are you putting that? What is going through your mind? And Connor and I just saw this last week in one of the playoff games in the OUA, where there's a quarterback, he made a throw, and we're just like, what are you doing? You could that's a grade 10 level read. Like, you're playing your 3rd or 4th year of university football and you're making that play. And that's just kind of like the head scratches that Cornelius puts you through in a game-to-game basis, right? It's never even just all good. There's always 1 or 2 just kind of curious throws, I'll say.
We're Washington football team, the Commanders. Now, we were 1 interception away, 1 bad throw, Heineke away from beating the Vikings last week. I mean, it's just that slim margin. 1
referee knocking out a safety away from being in a blowout. So that's just the fine details, right? Where it's those 2 throws that make a difference in professional football. And as Cornelius has gone through the last 2 years, really, year and a half since he got put into the league and into the game, You've seen some growth, but every time you think he's making leaps and bounds, he regresses, like we just talked about with the contract. So I don't know where Chris Jones goes. He's always got something going on behind the sunglasses, and he's got a ton of time between now and kickoff next year to figure it out.
But they got to, I mean, it's not as crucial here in the NFL. We're firing Frank Reich and all this stuff. And, I mean, but like you have teams making moves here, and you assume Ottawa instantly going to be better. They're going to get their quarterback back. Like whatever happened, we'll get a new coach and all that. But like Edmonton, a lot of these teams are figuring things out, and you just wonder like how long that leash is there. I mean, I know people say, trust in Chris Jones and all that, but there is a time coming for that at some point. There
is, and I mean, you saw that timer run out for Paul LaPolice this year. Even I don't think he ever got a fair shot in having a legitimate starting quarterback. But the timer ran out. Regardless of who's playing for you, you are on that timeline. And for Chris Jones, he's so well respected and so powerful even within the organization that I think his time is a bit more extended. So he feels this time to juggle and play, as you were saying. But for some of these rosters, I mean, Kari Jones's clock was ticking, and they ended up turning it around. So there's certainly hope for the teams at the bottom to make their way up through the ranks. Especially with the quarterbacks being available, I think that you can insert a Bo Levi or a Fajardo and kind of give yourself a jolt. I know that both the teams we're talking about have who they think is the guy. But even Saskatchewan, like you need to find something to propel yourself back to the top.
I don't think Bo is the answer there. I think that's going to be flashy, but I don't think that makes sustainable growth.
I don't think so either. I honestly want to see what they can do with Mason Fine for a full year. I know he saw a couple games of action, didn't look great this year, but it's a growing process. And when you know, but sometimes it takes a bit, right? I always say, give me 3 consecutive starts. And I think he played for a couple games this year, but 3 full starts in meaningful games. So next year we'll probably see that. But with Saskatchewan, I think it's just the offense as a whole just seemed too much blame was being put on the quarterback for a lot of other issues, like the lack of blocking by all offensive linemen.
No, I mean, and I don't think that Bo still, and he came into the game, I tweeted, I said, hey, Nathan Rourke beat both, the mayor and Bo Levi here in the same game. That's always exciting. But he looked good. I just think okay, you bring him into Saskatchewan, you get a year out of him, you get a lot of pub and you get a lot of excitement, but that's not a future plan at this point.
Yeah. I mean, 61 sacks taken by Fajardo. I'll pull up. Mason Fine had 15.
And not that many games.
No, so I mean and that was 15 in 2 games. So plus change, I guess, for the games that he filled in. But I really want to see just overall improvement from a team like Saskatchewan. Like, you need to go and make some big investments at the offensive line if you want any quarterback you throw back there to succeed. But with Bo Levi Mitchell, I don't know. I feel like he's eastward bound. I know it's westward bound, but I feel like he's heading to the Eastern Conference. Get him a little bit closer to Toronto. He does have the TSN deal for after he retires. Just get him closer to HQ for TSN.
I just had the final thoughts for me. Saskatchewan, total failure this year. I mean, to be hosting the Grey Cup and have all this, and it's such the coveted thing, right? We got to host a Grey Cup and the Mar, and we're doing the big thing in 24. And, to be able to be hosting all that and to not even make the playoffs in the CFL in the 60, and that's a pretty low bar.
Well, I mean, the confusing part for me was the punt for literal punt on the season when you still had a chance to cross over and still had some fight left. They just went, yeah, we're done with Cody. We're going to put Mason in for the last couple games. What? You have to win 1 or 2 games maybe and get some help if you only win 1 to cross over and make the playoffs and have a shot at your home Grey Cup. And it just seemed like they just kind of said, yeah, we don't want to do that. We either going to host a game or we're not doing it at all. And
what was it? The mythological, them crossing over and then being the away team in Regina making it to the Grey Cup. I like that idea. I thought that was a cool story, but I mean, they wasn't even close.
home game's a home game. Doesn't matter which color uniforms you have to wear. But for the whole staff to just kind of throw in the towel on the season with a couple weeks left, I don't know. It just didn't sit right to me, and it showed like, yeah, we're in full reset mode. We're going to hit it now and try and make something happen for next year.
Wade, I really appreciate it. A little extended here today, hopping on. Thank you so much running through everything. Should be exciting. I mean, I'm excited this weekend, locked in, America's CFL team, and then we'll see. But we'll be at the Grey Cup one way or another. But I do hope everyone's saying BC Montreal. I think that is the popular choice right now that people want.
I think that would be a great fan choice. I know there's a huge contingent from Winnipeg that would probably already have tickets bought in Regina. But no, I think either matchup out of the possible scenarios that we get are going to be fantastic, right? We can get BC and Montreal, like you said. BC Toronto would be an aerial battle as both quarterbacks sling the ball around the field. Winnipeg against Toronto would be kind of like Andrew Harris going back to try and stop the three-peat, and then Winnipeg Montreal would be just I think just a good game through and through. Both teams would be able to put up a good fight.
Wade, well, thanks again. I'm sure we'll get you back on. I appreciate your time, and it should be good.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Special thanks again to both of my guests this week. Greg Parks, long extended interview, late night, East Coast, getting done with the Inside the League talk, previewing the XFL Draft. Really appreciate that. And then Wade coming on, Wade Zanchetta with the CF Perspective podcast out of Canada. Really appreciate that. That will do it for me today. Like I said at the top, big shows coming next week. I will be live Tuesday, 11 a.m. Pacific, talking about the XFL quarterback selection show. Big guests getting ready to join me on that. I'll probably post that Monday. And then I will be here wall-to-wall, coast-to-coast coverage on Wednesday, 8:30 a.m. Pacific. Probably a little earlier, getting everything set. I know Andy Murray's hopping on, and I have a ton. Andy Murray will be with me both days, but then I have a ton of other guests. But Andy Murray, my ride or die, will be here. Lots of work coming for you guys next week. Really appreciate it. And then Dorothy and I will be up in Regina at Casino Regina. I posted on Twitter our big Grey Cup live show coming to you guys 3 p.m. Central Time on Saturday, November 19th. It'll be, I think it's 1 Pacific, so do the math there. The time zones, and now they're in daylight savings. It's all crazy, but look forward on the YouTube. There will not be a Friday show next week. It will be the Saturday show, previewing the Grey Cup. I will post the guest list for all that. I think I have like 10 people confirmed for that. So to confirm, coming up next week, Tuesday, live stream with Andy Murray, getting you ready, the quarterback selection process. I have a surprise guest that's going to be joining us as well. That should be fun. Wednesday, day-long coverage with Andy, everybody else talking XFL Draft. We'll be flying on Thursday, so I will probably be tweeting about the XFL Draft. There won't be a show on Thursday. Friday, our regularly scheduled episode will be on Saturday afternoon/evening, depending on your time, previewing the Grey Cup, hopefully BC versus Montreal if the gods are willing. So thank you guys so much again. Like and subscribe. There was some big USFL news this week as well, talking about potentially the Tampa Bay Bandits relocating to Memphis. I have lots of thoughts on that. We'll be doing some USFL talk. Hopefully that gets announced soon, but probably some USFL talk as well once we get done with all this XFL craziness. Anyway, like and subscribe. Thanks again. Take care, and we'll see you soon.